Do you have more faith in your doubt, or do you have more faith in God? Do you have more faith in the enemy's whisper or in God's whisper? See, God has this resume called the Bible, where he has shown up time and time and time again, where he has been faithful, that we can look at it if we would take the time and see that he has been good. And based off his resume from Genesis to Revelation, we can see that God is exactly who he said he's going to be. In Genesis, he is the presence hovering over the water since the beginning of time. He is the seed that bruised the serpent's head. And in Exodus, he's a cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night that led the Israelites out of Egypt, out of captivity, and into the promised land. Leviticus and Numbers, he's a high priest interceding for his people in the holiest of holies. And in Deuteronomy, he's a bearer of everlasting arms. And in Joshua, he's the captain of the host of the army of the Lord. And in Judges, I see God as the sword of the Lord fighting for his people. And in Ruth, he is the husband that takes on the imperfect bride, consistent, faithful. In 1 and 2 Samuel, he's the voice calling Samuel into the priesthood. And he is a rock that came from a slingshot to take down the giant. And I believe he's going to do it in your life too. And in 1 and 2 Kings, he is this whirlwind of power and a chariot of fire that called Elijah to heaven. He's the power given to the prophets to do miracles over and over and over again. And he's going to do it in your life. And in 1 and 2 Chronicles, he's the full glory and presence and splendor of God that filled the temple of Solomon from wall to wall. And in Ezra and Nehemiah, he's the voice calling the nation of Israel saying, go home, rebuild the walls of that city, because God is always about rebuilding things to their proper status. And in Esther, he's a queenly figure, interceding for the people that she so dearly loves. And in Job, I see God as Jesus crying out to God, saying, even though you slay me, I will trust in you. I trust in your word. I trust in your plan. And in Psalms, he's a good shepherd that leads us by still waters, who restores our soul. And in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, he's the wisdom and wise instruction from a father to his son. In the Song of Songs, he's the lily of the valley, and he's the rose of Sharon. God is beautiful. He is faithful. He is good. And in Isaiah, he's the perfect and flawless lamb, wounded for our transgressions and crushed for my sin. And in Jeremiah and Lamentations, he's the voice calling Jeremiah, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. I sanctified you. I ordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. And in Ezekiel, he's this wind that comes from the four quarters of the earth that breathes into a valley of dry bones. He wants to breathe into what's dead and what's dry in your life and bring it back to life. And in Daniel, he's this rock that came from a mountain to crush all other opposing nations. And in Joel, or Hosea, he's a loving and affectionate husband who redeemed the wayward bride. And in Joel, God is our provision. He is my provider. He is the former and the latter rain. He is what I needed yesterday, what I need now, and what I need forever. And in the books of the prophets of Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, he's the voice of those prophets spoken since the beginning of time that prepared a work for Jesus to come and restore your soul and mine. In the New Testament, he showed up as a baby. In the book of Matthew, swaddled in cloths, lying in a manger, but make no mistake about it, he was still the Lion of Judah. And in Mark, he's the healer of the blind. In Luke, he's the great physician, the Christ of Calvary, and the resurrected Lord. And in John, he was the Word who was made flesh that dwelt among us. And in Acts, he is the power and the giver of power given to new believers on the day of Pentecost to shake the world upside down. And I believe he's going to do it again. And in Romans, he is the only perfect fulfillment of the Old Testament law that's good enough to get you and good enough to get me into heaven. And in the letters to the Corinthians, the Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Thessalonians, he is the perfect doctrine of his church, fighting for that doctrine, fighting for his church, the church of Jesus Christ. In the letters to Timothy, Titus, and Philemon, he's a dedication of those three young men's entire life dedicated to furthering the gospel for the name of Jesus. And in Hebrews, he's the same God yesterday, today, and forever. He is the author and sustainer of our faith. And in James, Peter, John, and Jude, please hear me, he is the greatest, the most faithful power of the universe. Jesus, God is the power of love. In the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, church, please hear me, Jesus is the revelation. He is the first and the last, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. He's the culmination to what you're going through. He's the answer. He's the culmination to the conflict of the ages. His name is Jesus Christ. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. He is good. He is faithful. And based on his resume, you can put your trust in him.